I want to invite Sam Mwaura, the CEO of the Private Sector Development Trust, to make some remarks. Sam, I'm going to be unjust to you. You're the last one and you've been with us since this morning. Just 10 minutes on the potential for religious organizations to lead citizens to fight corruption. Thank you very much, Sam. You have the floor.
Thank you. I have been given 10 minutes, and therefore you will forgive me if I am very quick on a topic that is perhaps the most important for all of us in Kenya. Now, I want to address myself to the role of the citizens and what we can do to succeed in the fight against corruption. I state up front that this fight is winnable and it is doable. Now, George Kigoro, the previous speaker, talked about three partnerships which are critical to the winning of this battle. One is government, political will. Two is the institutions of government that are charged with the responsibility to fight corruption. And thirdly, it is the engagement of the citizens in order to call the government to account on this issue of corruption. And of the three pillars, the weakest one is the citizens. And yet it happens to be the most important. Without citizens engaged in this fight, it's never going to work. So what are the root causes of corruption in Kenya? The first one is failure of government to comply with the law. The second one is lack of citizen engagement in governance. The third one is high cost of doing politics. The fourth one is a bloated government. The fifth one is lack of institutional framework for the engagement of the non-state actors led by the religious organizations. So I will comment very briefly what can be done regarding these 6 areas. Now, the government failing to follow the law, I will quote 2 or so critical laws that the government failed to follow with disastrous consequences. The first law is the Public Finance Management Act 2012, Section 15(2)(c). That law provides that the government should only use borrowed money for development, and that repayment for those borrowings, the capital or the principal and interest, should come from the recurrent expenditure of government. And then finally, that borrowings should go towards financing specific projects which are included in the budget and in the Appropriation Act. Now, because this law was not followed, we are planning this year to spend 1.85 trillion shillings in debt servicing. If the law was followed, that amount would have been a maximum of 770 billion shillings. So we are spending more than 1 trillion, more than what we should have spent, and it's money that we do not have. Secondly, our tax revenue is around 2.2 trillion. So if you remove the 1.85 debt servicing, it leaves government with 350 billion shillings to run the country. It does not take a genius to understand that you cannot run a country with 350 billion shillings. The wage bill alone is 1.2 trillion. And therefore the government is bankrupt. Understand that, and there's no amount of politicking that will change that fact. The next problem is lack of citizen engagement. But before I go there, I can actually quote a second law. And this is the law, the same PFM Act 2012, that provides for government to spend a maximum of 35% of the tax revenue on the wage bill. That would equate to 770 billion, as I've stated, with regard to the debt. But the actual is 1.24. So we are overspending on the wage bill 474 billion shillings a year. Financing ghost workers, financing irresponsible hiring of people. In some counties, you have an average of 14 drivers for one vehicle. So it's just complete irresponsibility on the part of government. So lack of citizen engagement, which is the problem. We have been given all the power that we need as citizens. As you know, Article 1 of our Constitution provides that all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya. We have failed to exercise that power, and we are expecting, misplaced expectation as happens to be, that it is the politicians who will come and help us to implement that provision of the Constitution. And yet that Constitution, or that provision, takes away power from the politicians. So they're not going to do any such thing. We as citizens must come forward and help ourselves to implement that article. So the first requirement is to institutionalize the citizens from the village all the way up to the national level. We have demonstrated in a pilot that we have done in Kiladeshwa ward that you can organize the citizens under a ward neighborhood association with a framework all the way down to the households. And the transformation that has occurred in that ward since that organization was done some 5, 6 or so years ago is there to be seen by everybody. That community believes very strongly that it is the answer. Organizing the community is the answer to fixing our development problems. So that is something we must do across the entire. And what is more, there are laws that provide that organized citizens will be facilitated by government to do the work. The third issue is high cost of doing politics. It is high cost because politics in this country is financed by vested interests. People, and George Kigoro went into that, people finance government in the expectation that they will get a payback. The money they invested will be repaid with a huge profit. What we must do as citizens is to be the owners and drivers of political parties. At the moment, political parties are owned by the politicians, they are owned by individuals, and they are used as vehicles to get into power rather than vehicles through which you govern the country. We must oversight under this area of political governance. We must, as organized citizens, oversight the IEBC from the national to constituency down to the polling station level. Because the IEC is the government arm for elections. And good governance has two sides. Government on one side and organized citizens on the other side. The role of the citizens is to oversight government, and there is nobody else who can oversight government because it is the citizens who have the sovereign power. They have the political authority to enforce accountability on government. If we don't do it, Parliament fails to do it, the independent institutions including EACC, have failed to do it. So it's only the citizens who can restore order in this equation. If you doubt that citizens can perform this job, you just have to reflect back on the work that was done by Gen Zs. In 2 weeks, Gen Zs achieved what we as their parents have failed to do for over 20, 30 years. They demonstrated that the job of holding the government to account by citizens is doable. The next problem is the issue of bloated government. We have bloated government and top-heavy government. The cure of this is for government to finally implement village governance. Village governance is created and provided for in the County Governments Act 2012. It provides for government to create village councils at the ward, village, and one level below the village. That was done in Makueni by the retired Governor Kivuta Kibwana, and within no time he transformed Makueni. Makueni became the best performing county of all the counties in the country. His secret was organized citizens. He organized his citizens, and he organized and implemented village governance, and he unlocked the potential of the entire community. And that is what we now must do across all the counties. There is a new law created by the Senate which provides for the county governments to allocate a minimum of 60% of their development budget for use in the county, in the wards. When that happens, and it will only happen if we enforce accountability, then it means that every ward in this country will receive an allocation of minimum 50 million shillings a year for small infrastructure and development projects. A county like Nairobi, which is wealthier, will receive a minimum of 80 million shillings a year. If you bring 80 million shillings in our ward every year, in 5 years we'll have transformed that ward, even with no other money from government. If we implement the village governance and we organize the citizens and the citizen organization to mirror government, we would be able to cut government by 50%. You reduce the wards by 50%, and incidentally that was the recommendation of the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution under Charles Nyachai in their final report. They recommended that we reduce the wards to 700, down from 1450. You cut the constituencies by 50%, you don't need them. You cut the county governments by 50%. The government has admitted that itself, that there are too many unsustainable county governments. And you convert the current county governments into service delivery centers. And otherwise you create larger and more viable county governments. Now, the parastatals of government, you can cut them by even 90%, but I'm being generous, cut them by 50% as a starting point, and departments of government. That way you have a lean and efficient government that is not gobbling up all the resources that we are able to raise in this country. Now, going back to the item number 6, which is organization of all the non-state actors. The citizens break down into communities and stakeholders. The religious sector is one of the critical stakeholders. But organized communities can now partner with the religious organizations, with the civil society, with business, to create a framework for the non-state actors to perform two functions. First of all, to operate on the demand side of governance. Without citizens joining governance, we'll be busy going nowhere. Secondly, to do advocacy and hold the government to account. So we are inviting the religious organizations to lead that framework, because religious organizations are the ones with God-given mandate to look after the poor, and that is in the Bible. Therefore you will find them willing to work with us as citizens and other stakeholders to create a strong framework for the non-state actors. The framework to start from the village all the way down to all the way up to the national level. We will allocate a special role for the religious organizations, a role that we are not performing particularly well. You are familiar with the associations, business, stakeholder, and neighborhood associations. Those associations always deal and prioritize sectoral issues. And yet, our problem is the cross-cutting issues. Public debt, corruption, wastage in government, impunity of government, lack of political governance. All that is what we are packaging and asking the religious organizations to lead, so that they have representation in the organs of governance as institutions, and we are proposing that men, women, and youth who are organized under the religious organizations also take that role, so that we have champions for these cross-cutting issues. Remember, it's the cross-cutting issues that constitute the baking of the cake. And if we do not bake a bigger cake, then there is not enough cake for sharing amongst the different communities and interests. And we will end up continue to fight the way we do in the sharing of an ever-shrinking size of the cake. Now, where do we start? We will start with enforcing accountability, because the people who have failed to do their job are the members of parliament. We delegated authority to them to oversight government. They have failed to do so. So, the first thing we will do is that we will recall our MPs. And that has been proposed by the religious organizations. They are 100% correct. We will carry out lifestyle audit on the MPs. Some MPs have accumulated some obscene amounts of money in the 2 years since they got elected. They had nothing, and now they are multi-billionaires. So we want them to explain how they acquired all that wealth within that time. And we will petition the ACC to come and carry out lifestyle audit on those MPs. You will know the assets of your own MP, where you come from. And therefore, communities will work with the ACC in order to get that job done. In the last report of the Auditor General on the CDF committees, almost 100% of the CDF committees have massively embezzled money. They have abused use of the CDF kitty, and therefore we have enough ammunition to call for the disbanding of all those committees as part of our strong advocacy arising from today's conference. If we do not take these actions and expect that it's government that is benefiting from corruption that will be engineering the fight against corruption, we will be waiting from now until the end of the world. It will never happen. Those are just a few ideas that I have put on the table of what we can do as citizens. We are going to follow up on it as the team that organized this conference, and we are going to make sure that we start helping ourselves as citizens in the fight against corruption and in the improvement of governance in this country. Thank you for listening.